Hey guys, it's Viejo here, and this is the beginning of the second week of June in 2024. Another nice day here on the central coast of California. Overcast in the morning. It broke off pretty quickly, time enough for me to get out and get the morning walk done. But today we're up here at chapter 12 of part 3 of this series on 45 ACP 230 grain round nose tests that we've been running. If you're just dialing into this particular video, what we're doing is taking a look at the data sections in the Lee Modern Reloading Handbook, okay, a second edition by Richard Lee, and along with some really good information on how to reload that's in the front of this. It has some really good stuff there. There's a lot of load data for us there. The only thing is that the data that's there was not compiled by Lee. They did not go out and do the shooting. They gleaned all of this data from other sources, powder manufacturers, bullet manufacturers, and so forth, and stuck it all into one spot for each type of bullet. In this case, we've been looking at the 230 grain round nose lead bullet, cast bullet data section. And we have included a couple jackets and a couple plateds just for comparison's sake. Well, the question then is hey, my bullet's not there. I don't know what bullet those are. I've got this bullet. How do I, pick a set of data? Because there's a whole bunch of powders listed, a whole bunch of starting and, minimum, maximum charges, and several different cartridge overall lengths. So which one do you use? And, what do you do with that data? Is it okay to just pick a powder and a charge and go with it with your bullet, regardless of, whether it's that bullet or not? Well, that's sort of what we're up to. There's a link in the description box to the playlist for all of the videos in this series. The first two were kind of the introductory ones that talk more about what we're looking at and why, and how we loaded the rounds. And what I did was I picked a charge of Winchester 231 powder that I knew was going to be safe because I've shot all of these bullets in the past and kind of knew where they were going to go. I knew they'd at least function and would not be anywhere near maximum charge for any of them. And we've gotten all kinds of interesting results here to look at. And what we're going to look at today is the Accura plated bullets, another 230 grain round nose bullet. And we went out and shot that one and collected some chrono data and got some measurements and stuff here for you to look at. So let's bring the camera down in here at the page, and we'll kind of go through what the info for this Accura bullet is. Okay, so here's our Accura plated bullet, 230 grains. That bullet has an overall length, I'm talking about the bullet itself now, not the cartridge overall length, of 0.636 inches. I loaded these at 1.260, and if we kind of look up the line there, you can see that the cartridge overall lengths are all different, and you can go back in the first few videos and take a look to see why that is. But basically, the cartridge overall length is going to be determined by the fitment in your firearm. In this case, we shot them all out of the Kimber Stainless 2 1911 45 ACP, and that's the length that worked best for that firearm. Well, when we shot them, we shot 2 magfuls, just like we do with all of these, 14 rounds. It gave an average velocity of 759 feet per second with a standard deviation of 15. It turns out that's one of the higher standard deviations. Let's talk about this standard deviation for just a second. And incidentally, if you noticed down here, I did have a couple requests to go ahead and show that Kramer bullet. I had acquired that mold after I started this test, and I asked in a previous video, hey, do you guys want to see that one too? Because I did load it and shoot it just the same as we did all the rest of these. And a few guys said yeah, so we're going to include that, and that'll come up next week. But let's talk about this standard deviation and this velocity number here, which is the lowest of all the bullets that we've got to shoot so far. Okay, if you're new to reloading, this idea of standard deviation may not resonate with you, or if you're not a reloader at all. And it gets talked about ad nauseum amongst reloaders. And what it is it's about the variation in velocity from round to round to round under the same load. All right, and it's a prediction is all it is. And it's a measurement in feet per second. And again, you can't see it from where you are right now, but for this Accura bullet, the standard deviation was 15. Well, 15 feet per second is what that means. And it's telling us that based on data collected by your chronograph, a mathematical computation is done that predicts that about 68% of all of the rounds fired with that exact same load should fall within plus or minus 15 feet per second of the average, which in this case was 759 feet per second. So 68% we would predict would be anywhere between 744 and 774, okay, feet per second should fall in that range, okay. About 98%, 96% should fall within 2 standard deviations, in other words, plus or minus 30 feet per second, and 99.7% should fall within 3 standard deviations, or plus or minus 45 feet per second. Again, it's just a prediction. Doesn't say anything about accuracy, really. And it's difficult to place a true meaning on that number. Even though this has one of the poorest standard deviations, I think it's the second worst of all of these. We like to see standard deviation of less than 10 feet per second. In other words, we would like to see our velocities be pretty consistent, and apparently these weren't. But it shot better than some of them. Okay, so what about standard deviation? Well, there's a lot of things that would affect the velocity of a round, and it's not just the powder charge. Okay, there's obviously variations in all of these bullets, the overall bullet length, the length of the shank, and thus the amount of bearing surface of that particular bullet in the barrel. Okay, diameters might be a little bit different. There's going to be variations in your case, particularly with these. These were all done with Winchester cases, and all same head stamp anyway. But even at that, there's going to be variation in case capacity, case volume under the bullet. Just, every bullet, even within one group like these Accuras, they're not all identical. So there's just a lot of things that can go into play that will affect the velocity of that bullet coming out of the muzzle. So it's pretty hard to put a stamp on standard deviation and say, oh, 15, then that's a terrible round. Air temperature that day can affect it. So a lot of things can affect it, but it does point to consistency of the load for that particular bullet, and it's really difficult to say that this 15 makes it worse than any of the rest of these. Okay, so anyway, there's that. Right? We don't pay 100% attention to standard deviation. We pay attention to accuracy and how well the round performs. Okay, then we can come back. If it's not performing well, we can look at the standard deviation and say, well, man, I don't know, that velocities were pretty wild coming out of that barrel. So why would that be? And then we can backtrack from there and start looking for reasons for that variance. And there's more than the 3 or 4 that I listed too. There are lots of things that go into affecting velocity. And you talk to the long range shooters, and they'll give you a list that long of the things that they work on to get good consistency in velocity. Well, this guy did okay. It was really slow. It was the slowest of all of them. And some of you correctly predicted that our plateds and jacketeds were going to be slower than the cast bullets, and there's reasons for that too. We'll talk about that, I think, in a little bit more at a later time. We're going to do this Kramer mold, incidentally, and then we'll come back and and summarize the whole thing, talk about all that stuff a little bit more. So let's go ahead and take a look at the range footage. And this is another one that my GoPro camera, the one that's pointed up at me when I'm actually out there shooting, the video freezes, and I think I've got that narrowed down to something about the batteries. I've got some aftermarket GoPro batteries, and they seem to do that every time. If I use a genuine GoPro battery, that doesn't seem to happen, and I don't know why it should. The sound keeps up, but that part of the video freezes after just a few seconds. So we'll just have to put up with that, like we've done a couple times in the past. I was just looking at the footage for the Kramer one though, and it ran fine. So who knows? Anyway, let's go ahead and cut in a little bit of range footage and see what this one printed on paper for you, and then we'll come back. Hey, Ed, figuring out why this gun is... No, why I'm shooting it. I've been shooting this a long time. And I just figured out... Here's the Accura. I got one high up there. The rest of them all did pretty well. Velocity's a little low on these guys, but they shot okay. Okay, there it is. My first round out of there, clean barrel, cold barrel, first shot of the day. It went up high a little bit, and then there was another one that was just kind of out of the rest of the cluster. But there were 12 of them that were in there like that. So, I was reasonably happy with the way that bullet performed, other than the fact that it was pretty slow. It's another case of, I think if I ran it faster, it would do even better. But I haven't extensively tested that one. This is not the load that I normally use with that bullet. I use a load that runs it up closer to 850, and it does pretty well there. It's actually a pretty good bullet. Anyway, I hope you got something out of that. We're getting close to the end of the series here. A couple more. We're going to do the Kramer next time, and then the week after that, we'll come back in and finalize and summarize and ostracize and all those other sizes that we have to do. All right. Okay. That's going to do it for this one. So from the Viejo bench, for now, that's all she wrote.